The rain fell softly against the towering windows of the Apex, a restaurant that floated 60 floors above the city streets. Boston glimmered below like scattered diamonds, the lights blurred by mist and distance. Inside, leather seats held men who owned companies, influenced markets, and never thought twice about the price of anything. Vincent Drake sat among them, his dark suit perfectly tailored, his expression calm but distant. At 34, he had built a technology empire that revolutionized digital security. Magazines called him a genius. Investors called him unstoppable. But lately he felt neither brilliant nor powerful. He felt numb. The challenged Trevor Hammond leaned across the polished table, his face flushed with expensive scotch and confidence. Trevor had inherited his wealth, unlike Vincent, who had earned every dollar. Perhaps that difference made Trevor crueler, more careless with the feelings of others. "You know what your problem is, Drake?" Trevor said, gesturing with his glass. "You built an empire on protecting digital lives, but you forgot how to live a real one. When did you last feel something genuine?" The other men at the table chuckled. Vincent said nothing, simply lifting his water glass. He had stopped drinking years ago, preferring to keep his mind sharp while others dulled theirs. Trevor continued, emboldened by the silence. "I will make you a wager. Prove to me that someone authentic, someone who works for a living, would choose you for who you are, not what you have. No fame, no fortune displayed. Just you. And what exactly are you proposing?" Vincent asked, his voice even. "Get someone real to show genuine interest in you tonight, not someone from our world. A worker, a regular person. If you can do that, I will donate $500,000 to any charity you name." The table erupted in laughter and agreement. Vincent studied Trevor for a long moment. He should have walked away. Instead, something bitter and lonely inside him responded. "Fine, but when I prove you wrong, you donate $1 million and you volunteer at that charity for 6 months. Trevor grinned and extended his hand. Deal. When worlds collide, Nora Bennett moved through the restaurant with practiced efficiency, her black uniform crisp despite the long hours. Her brown hair was pulled back neatly, and her hazel eyes carried the weight of someone who understood hardship intimately. She balanced 3 plates on her left arm and carried 2 wine glasses in her right hand. Table 12 needed their entrees. Table 15 wanted more bread, and Table 8, the loud group of businessmen, had been demanding and dismissive all evening. Her feet ached. She had worked a double shift because Maria called in sick, and Nora needed the extra money desperately. Every dollar mattered now. Every tip counted toward the mountain of medical bills that threatened to bury her family. As she approached Table 8, one of the men gestured wildly while telling a story. His elbow knocked into her arm just as she passed. The wine glass tilted, and despite her quick reflexes, deep red liquid splashed across the pristine white shirt of the quiet man at the end of the table. Time seemed to freeze. The laughter stopped. All eyes turned to her. Nora felt her face burning with embarrassment and fear. She could not afford to lose this job. Her father's treatment depended on her income. "I'm so incredibly sorry, sir," she stammered, immediately grabbing napkins from a nearby station. Her hands shook as she tried to blot the spreading stain. "Please let me help. I will pay for the cleaning. I am so sorry." An unexpected response. Vincent looked down at his ruined shirt, then up at the waitress. Her face showed genuine distress, not the calculated apology of someone trying to avoid consequences. Her hands trembled as she dabbed uselessly at the wine. "It is fine," he said gently, surprising himself with the softness in his voice. "Accidents happen." Trevor jumped in with mock concern. "Well, Drake, looks like you found your authentic connection." She certainly made an impression. The table roared with laughter. Nora flinched at the cruel joke, but Vincent noticed something remarkable. Despite her obvious fear of losing her job, her eyes flashed with dignity. She did not grovel or collapse. She stood straight and met his gaze directly. "Again, I apologize," she said firmly. "I take full responsibility." "No need," Vincent replied. "Really, it is just a shirt. Just a shirt." The words felt strange on his tongue. To him, it truly meant nothing. He could buy 100 identical shirts without thought. but he saw her eyes flicker to the Italian label on the collar, and he knew she was calculating costs she could not afford. As she hurried away, Vincent watched her disappear into the kitchen. Something about that brief interaction had cracked through his usual detachment. The way she carried her worry with such quiet strength reminded him of his own mother, years ago, before his success had lifted them from poverty, seeds of connection. The rest of the dinner blurred. Trevor kept making jokes about the incident, but Vincent barely heard them. His mind kept returning to the waitress with tired eyes and steady hands. Before leaving, Vincent approached the manager. "The waitress who spilled the wine, what is her name?" The manager paled slightly. "Nora Bennett, sir. I assure you she will be disciplined. If you wish to file a complaint, I completely understand." "No complaint," Vincent said firmly. "I want you to give her this." He handed over an envelope containing $500. "For the inconvenience I caused her by sitting in her section." The manager looked confused, but nodded. As Vincent walked out into the rainy night, he realized Trevor's bet had already changed something. For the first time in months, he felt curious about another person. Not her usefulness to him, not what she could provide, but simply who she was. Above the city, storm clouds gathered. Below in the restaurant kitchen, Nora counted her tips with desperate hope, unaware that her life was about to transform in ways she could never imagine. The wager had been made. But neither man understood yet that the real stakes had nothing to do with money or pride. They had everything to do with the human heart and its stubborn refusal to be bought, sold, or traded like everything else in their world. 3 days passed like shadows. Nora worked her shifts, visited her father at the hospital, and tried to silence the worry that hummed constantly in her mind. The $500 the manager had given her felt like a small miracle, though she did not understand why the man with the ruined shirt had left it for her. Her father, Thomas Bennett, had been a carpenter before the illness struck. Now he lay in a sterile room, his strong hands thin and weak against white sheets. The doctors spoke of treatments that might help, experimental options that insurance refused to cover. The numbers made Nora dizzy. $60,000. It might as well have been $60 million. On Thursday evening, the restaurant was quieter than usual. Autumn rain drummed steadily against the windows and most tables sat empty. Nora was refilling salt shakers when the hostess approached with a strange expression. "Nora, there is a guest requesting your section specifically." Her stomach tightened. Had the man from the other night come to complain after all? She smoothed her apron and walked toward the dining area, preparing herself for confrontation. Vincent Drake sat alone by the window, watching rain trace patterns down the glass. He wore a simple gray sweater and dark jeans, looking more human than he had in his expensive suit. When he saw her approach, something like relief crossed his face. "You came back," Nora said carefully, standing at a professional distance. "I did." He gestured to the empty chair across from him. "Would you sit with me for a moment? I promise I am not here to cause you trouble. Honest conversations." Nora glanced around. Her manager was in the kitchen, and the few other guests were occupied. Against her better judgment, she sat down. "I wanted to apologize," Vincent began, "for my friends the other night. Their behavior was cruel." "You are not responsible for other people's rudeness," Nora replied. "But thank you. And thank you for the money you left. That was far too generous." "It was not generosity. It was guilt." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I have spent years building walls between myself and genuine human connection. That night, something about your honesty broke through. I wanted to see you again." Nora studied him, trying to understand his intentions. Rich men did not seek out waitresses for simple conversation. "What do you want from me, Mr. Drake?" "Vincent, please." "And honestly, I am not entirely sure. Maybe just to talk to someone real." "Real," she repeated with a slight laugh. "You say that like people in your world are made of plastic." "Some are," he admitted. "Myself included most days." Despite herself, Nora felt her guard lowering slightly. There was something genuinely lonely in his eyes, a heaviness she recognized. "Why me? You could talk to anyone, because you did not see me as a wallet or an opportunity. You saw me as the person whose shirt you accidentally ruined." He smiled faintly. Do you know how rare that is? They talked for nearly an hour. Nora found herself sharing things she rarely told anyone about her father's illness, about her abandoned dreams of becoming a teacher, about her younger brother, who was working 2 jobs to help with bills. Vincent listened without interrupting, without offering empty reassurances. In turn, he told her about building his company from nothing, about the isolation that came with success, about losing touch with the person he used to be. His vulnerability surprised her. The line crossed. As their conversation deepened, Vincent found himself doing something he had not done in years. He was being completely honest. No performance, no strategy, just truth. How much do you owe for your father's treatment? He asked suddenly. Nora stiffened. Why would you ask that? Because I might be able to help. I did not tell you about my father so you would feel sorry for me, she said, her voice cooling. I do not need charity. It would not be charity. It would be me doing something meaningful with money that otherwise just accumulates. She stood, preparing to leave. Thank you for the conversation, Vincent. But I manage my own problems. Wait. He stood too, and something desperate flickered across his face. The loneliness, the isolation, the stupid bet still echoing in his mind, all of it converged into terrible judgment. What if I paid all of your father's medical bills? Everything. He could get the treatment he needs immediately. Nora turned back, hope and suspicion warring in her expression. In exchange for what? The question hung between them like a blade. Vincent knew he should stop, should take back the implication before it formed. But weeks of emptiness and Trevor's mocking voice pushed him forward into his worst self. One night, he said quietly. Just spend one night with me. Shattered trust. The words landed like physical blows. Nora felt something inside her chest crack open. For a moment, she had thought this man might be different, might see her as more than a transaction. How foolish! You think you can buy me? She said, her voice shaking with fury and hurt. You sat here, listened to me talk about my dying father, and thought that made me desperate enough to sell myself? Nora, I did not mean it like that. How else could you possibly mean it? Tears burned in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. You are exactly like every other rich man who thinks the world is a store and everyone in it has a price tag. Please, let me explain. Explain what? That you see me as a commodity? That my father's life is worth one night of whatever you think I owe you? She stepped back as if his presence physically hurt her. I would rather watch my father die with his dignity intact than let you strip mine away. Vincent reached for her, but she flinched away from his touch. The rejection cut deeper than any business failure ever had. I am sorry, he said desperately. I am so sorry. I was not thinking clearly. I just wanted to help, and I ruined it by being careless and selfish. You did not want to help me, Nora said coldly. You wanted to help yourself feel less empty. But you cannot buy your way out of loneliness, Vincent. You have to actually be a decent person. She walked away, her footsteps quick and determined. Vincent stood frozen, watching her disappear through the kitchen doors. Around him, the restaurant continued its quiet rhythm, indifferent to the disaster he had just created. He left money on the table and walked out into the rain. The cold water soaked through his sweater, but he barely noticed. All he could see was the look in her eyes, the moment when hope had turned to disgust. Desperate measures. That night, Nora sat in her small apartment, staring at the stack of medical bills on her kitchen table. Her father had 3 weeks, maybe 4, before the hospital would stop treatment. After that, it would just be comfort care, waiting for the end. She thought about Vincent's offer and hated herself for even considering it. But what was her dignity worth against her father's life? What price could she put on a few more years with the man who had raised her alone after her mother left, who had worked himself to exhaustion to give her opportunities? Rain battered her windows. Somewhere across the city, Vincent Drake sat in his luxury apartment, probably already forgetting about the waitress he had insulted. Men like him moved on quickly from their mistakes, but Nora could not move on. She had one chance to save her father, and she had let pride stand in the way. At midnight, she found herself standing outside Vincent's building. The doorman looked at her rain-soaked clothes with obvious judgment, but she gave him the apartment number and he reluctantly let her up. When Vincent opened his door, Shock and something like pain crossed his face. Nora stood in the hallway, water dripping from her jacket onto expensive marble floors. "If your offer still stands," she said, her voice hollow, "then I accept. Save my father, and I will give you whatever you want." Vincent stared at her, his heart breaking at what his thoughtless words had driven her to do. This was not what he wanted. This was not who he wanted to be. "Nora, please come inside," he said gently. "But not for what you think." She stepped into his apartment, trembling with cold and resignation. Vincent grabbed a blanket and wrapped it around her shoulders. She stood rigid, waiting for him to claim what he had paid for. Instead, he moved to his desk and began writing a check. "I am giving you this," he said quietly, "with no conditions, no expectations, no strings attached whatsoever. Your father will get his treatment. You owe me nothing." Nora stared at the check, confusion replacing her resignation. "I don't understand." "I was wrong," Vincent said, his voice rough with emotion. "What I said to you was cruel and dehumanizing. I do not want your body or your gratitude. I want to do something right for once in my miserable, isolated life." "Why?" she whispered. "Because you made me feel human again," he said simply. "And I repaid that gift by treating you like a transaction. Let me try to be better. Please." For a long moment, Nora said nothing. Then, slowly, she took the check. Her hands shook as she looked at the amount, enough to cover everything with room left over for her brother's education. "I do not know how to thank you," she said. "You do not have to. Just let your father get well. That is enough." As she turned to leave, Vincent spoke again. "Nora, I truly am sorry. You deserved better than what I offered." She paused at the door, looking back at him. The loneliness in his eyes matched the ache in her own heart. "Maybe we both deserve better than what life has given us." Then she was gone, leaving Vincent alone with the rain and the weight of his redemption. Morning light filtered through hospital windows, pale and hesitant. Nora sat beside her father's bed, holding his weathered hand as Dr. Patel explained the treatment plan. Thomas Bennett listened with tears in his eyes, unable to comprehend how his daughter had managed such a miracle. "The experimental therapy starts next week," Dr. Patel said warmly. "The success rates are very promising, Mr. Bennett. You have a real chance now." After the doctor left, Thomas squeezed his daughter's hand weakly. "Nora, where did this money come from? What did you do?" "Nothing bad, Dad," she assured him, though her heart felt complicated and heavy. "Someone helped us. Someone who wanted to do something good." "I raised you to stand on your own 2 feet," Thomas said, concern creasing his thin face. "I do not want you indebted to anyone." "I am not," Nora said firmly, and realized as she spoke that it was true. Vincent had given freely, expecting nothing. That gift carried its own strange burden, one she did not quite know how to carry. Over the following week, Nora tried to return to normal life. She worked her shifts, smiled at customers, and pretended nothing had changed. But everything had changed. The crushing weight of financial desperation had lifted, replaced by something more confusing. Gratitude mixed with shame, relief tangled with questions she could not answer. Why had Vincent Drake really helped her? What did a man who had everything hope to gain from saving someone he barely knew? Searching for answers, Vincent threw himself into work with an intensity that worried his assistant. He attended meetings without really listening, approved projects without his usual scrutiny, and spent long nights staring at his computer screen without seeing the numbers displayed there. He could not stop thinking about Nora, not with desire or possession, but with genuine concern. Had her father started treatment? Was she managing all right? Did she hate him for what he had said, even though he had tried to make it right? 2 weeks after their last encounter, he found himself driving to the Apex again. He told himself he was just checking on an investment, ensuring his money had been used properly. But he knew the truth. He needed to see her, to know she was okay. The hostess informed him that Nora had requested fewer shifts, focusing on being with her father during treatment. Vincent felt both relieved and disappointed. He left without ordering, walking back to his car through the cool autumn evening. Vincent Drake, as I live and breathe. He turned to find Trevor Hammond leaning against an expensive sports car, a mocking smile on his face. "Trevor," Vincent acknowledged coolly. "I have been meaning to ask about our little wager," Trevor said. "Did you ever manage to prove that someone real would choose you? Or did you finally accept that people only see your bank account?" Vincent studied his former friend, seeing clearly now what he had been too lonely to recognize before. Trevor was not just wealthy and careless. He was deeply unhappy, spreading his misery through cruelty disguised as humor. "The bet is off," Vincent said quietly. "I am not interested in proving anything to you anymore." "So you failed," Trevor laughed. "I knew you would. You are too cold, Drake, too disconnected from actual humanity." "Maybe I was," Vincent replied, "but I am trying to change that. You should try it sometime." He walked away, leaving Trevor sputtering behind him. For the first time in years, Vincent felt no need to win an argument or prove his superiority. He simply wanted to be better. An unexpected visitor. 3 weeks after receiving the check, Nora stood outside Vincent's building again. This time she was dry, composed, and carrying a small bakery box. The doorman recognized her and waved her through with a knowing smile. When Vincent answered his door, surprise and something like joy flickered across his face before he could hide it. "Nora, is everything all right? Your father?" "He is doing well," she said, offering a small smile. "The treatment is working. The doctors are cautiously optimistic." "That is wonderful news." Vincent stepped back. "Please come in." She entered, looking around at his apartment with new eyes. It was beautiful but sterile, like a photograph from a magazine rather than a home where someone actually lived. "I brought you something," she said, handing him the bakery box. "Apple turnovers. You mentioned during our conversation that your mother used to make them." Vincent opened the box, staring at the pastries as if they were precious artifacts. "You remembered that? You listened to my stories. I listened to yours." She sat on the edge of his couch, her posture still careful. "I came to say thank you properly. What you did for my father, for my family, I will never be able to repay that. I do not want repayment, I know. That is why I am here." Nora met his eyes directly. "I have been trying to understand you, Vincent Drake. You offered me something terrible, something that hurt me deeply. But then you gave me everything I needed and asked for nothing in return. Which one is the real you?" Vincent sat across from her, silent for a long moment. "Honestly, I think they both are. I am capable of being thoughtless and cruel when I forget that other people are real, complete human beings with their own struggles and dignity. But I am also capable of being better when someone reminds me what really matters." "And what does matter?" Nora asked softly. "Connection," he said simply. "Not transactions or acquisitions or wins and losses. Just genuine human connection. You reminded me of that. Building something real, they talked for hours that evening. Not about money or obligations, but about real things. Nora told him about her father's progress, how he smiled more each day, how her brother had cried with relief when the financial burden lifted. Vincent told her about ending his friendship with Trevor, about starting to volunteer at a youth center teaching coding to underprivileged kids. "I want to do something that matters," he explained. "I built a company that protects data, but I forgot to protect the things that actually need protecting. People, relationships, kindness. That is a good start," Nora said. "But changing takes time. You cannot just decide to be different and have it happen overnight. Will you help me?" The question came out more vulnerable than he intended. "Not because you owe me anything, but because I think you see me clearly. Both the good parts and the broken ones." Nora considered this carefully. "I can be your friend, Vincent, if you truly want that. But I need you to understand something. I am not a project you can fix or a trophy you can win. I am just a person trying to live my life with dignity." "I know," he said quietly. "And that is exactly why I need you in my life. You remind me how to be human." Over the following months, something unexpected grew between them. Vincent started showing up at the hospital, bringing coffee for Nora during her father's treatments. He never stayed long, never made demands on her time, just offered quiet support. Nora invited him to her small apartment for dinner, where he met her brother and saw how real people lived when every dollar mattered. He did not judge or pity. He simply listened and learned. They took walks through the city, talking about everything and nothing. Vincent learned about Nora's abandoned dream of teaching and quietly arranged for her to take online certification courses. Nora learned about Vincent's childhood poverty, how he had built his empire partly to escape the helplessness he once felt. The moment everything changed. On a cold December evening, they stood together on a bridge overlooking the city. Lights sparkled below like earthbound stars, and snow fell softly around them. "My father is in remission," Nora said, her voice thick with emotion. "The doctors say he has years ahead of him. Maybe decades." Vincent felt his throat tighten with genuine happiness. "That is incredible, Nora. I am so happy for you." She turned to him, snowflakes catching in her dark hair. "You gave me my father back. You gave my family hope. How do I even begin to thank you for that?" "You already have," Vincent said softly. "You gave me something more valuable. You gave me a reason to be better." "Vincent," Nora began, then hesitated. "These past months spending time with you, I have seen who you really are. Not the billionaire or the businessman, just you. And what do you see?" he asked, hardly daring to breathe. "I see someone lonely who is learning not to be. Someone who made a terrible mistake but chose to grow from it instead of hiding behind excuses. I see someone I could maybe fall in love with if you wanted that." Vincent reached for her hand, his touch gentle and asking permission. "I have wanted that since the night you stood in my apartment, brave enough to sacrifice everything for someone you love. That kind of strength, that kind of heart, I have never known anything like it." "I was not brave," Nora said. "I was desperate. You were both. And you made me want to be worthy of knowing you." She stepped closer, closing the distance between them. "So prove it. Not with money or grand gestures. Just be honest with me, always. Be real. I can do that," Vincent promised. "I want to do that." When they kissed, soft and tentative, it felt like the beginning of something neither had expected. Not a transaction or a conquest, but a genuine partnership built on mutual respect and hard-won trust. Spring came to Boston with gentle rain and blooming trees. Thomas Bennett walked his daughter down the aisle of a small community center, his steps steady and strong. Vincent Drake waited at the altar, his eyes bright with unshed tears. The ceremony was simple, attended by people who mattered rather than people who impressed. Nora's brother served as best man. Her father gave a toast about second chances and the surprising places love appears. Vincent had offered to pay for an elaborate wedding, but Nora had refused. "We start our life together simply," she insisted, "with honesty and real things, not performances." So they married surrounded by hospital staff who had cared for Thomas, by the kids from Vincent's youth center, by the other waitresses from the Apex who had supported Nora through difficult times. Trevor Hammond was not invited. That evening, Vincent and Nora stood on the balcony of a modest hotel, watching the city lights shimmer in the warm air. "Do you ever regret how we met?" Vincent asked quietly. "The terrible things I said?" Nora leaned against him, feeling safe and chosen. "I regret that you thought so little of yourself that you believed you had to buy connection. But I do not regret where it led us. You learned to be better. I learned that people can change if they truly want to." "I love you," Vincent said simply. "Not because you need me or because I need to save anyone. Just because you are exactly who you are." "I love you too," Nora replied. "The real you. The one who was always there underneath the loneliness." Below them, the city hummed with a million stories. A million people searching for connection in a world that often felt cold and transactional. But here, on this balcony, two people had found something genuine, something built not on desperate bets or financial exchange, but on the patient work of becoming worthy of each other's trust. The rain that had begun their story fell softly again, washing the streets clean, making everything new. And in that gentle spring evening, Vincent and Nora began their life together, proving that even the most broken beginnings can lead to the most beautiful endings. Not because money can buy happiness, but because two people chose to see each other, clearly forgive each other honestly, and build something real from the ashes of their mistakes. Love, they discovered, was not a transaction after all. It was a choice made every day to be vulnerable, honest, and brave enough to grow. And that was worth more than all the wealth in the world. The end.